Outrage over the firing of the chancellor at Ole Miss, but will Dan Jones get his job back? At Issue starts right now. Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the critical issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. And we want you to share your opinions and comments with us. Just go to facebook.com/MPB Online News. On Twitter, our handle is @IssueMPB. Also visit our webpage, mpbonline.org. The firing of Ole Miss Chancellor Dr. Dan Jones by the Board of Trustees at the State Institutions of Higher Learning is at issue tonight. The board has been negotiating with Dr. Jones to reinstate him to his position by offering him a 2-year contract extension under the condition he must leave his post at the end of his contract and he must formally apologize to the board. So far, Jones has rejected the board's offer, and the board had an emergency meeting Friday afternoon to discuss the matter. A crowd estimated at around 2,500, made up of students, faculty, and alumni, protested the firing of Dr. Jones on campus in Oxford earlier this week. It was the largest student protest there in decades. Former Ole Miss Chancellor Robert Khayat called the board's decision not to renew Jones' contract a terrible mistake. Khayat says Jones' performance was remarkable, overseeing the campus in Oxford and the University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson. Jones was selected chancellor by the College Board in 2009 when he was serving as vice chancellor and dean of the medical school.
I will work hard to be sure that I'm building trust with individual board members. I've certainly taken my responsibility for the relationship that's obviously broken. There's only one relationship where I'll take full blame for trouble in communication, and that's with my wife. Otherwise, pretty much everything, all my relationships in life, when they get off kilter, it's usually, there's some element of responsibility on both sides. And so I'll say that there were some things about the way the board was organized that made it a little bit harder to maintain that trust, but if constraints are still in place, I'm going to work hard to work around those constraints to keep relationships with individual board members and to keep trust between us and for them to have confidence in my decision making.
The vice president of the College Board, Alan Perry, said about Jones overseeing the University of Mississippi Medical Center, quote, "The commissioner, with the support from the entire board, demanded better compliance with procedures, and it didn't happen. Their compliance continued to be ineffective," end quote. One of the reasons cited by the College Board for not renewing Jones' contract was problems with financial management at UMMC. Dr. James Keaton, the recently retired vice chancellor at the medical center, worked closely with Jones. He is taking exception to the criticism. Dr. Keaton says Jones made a great positive impact at UMMC, improving business procedures and growing the medical center's budget to $1.5 billion. College Board Vice President Alan Perry says there was a lack of oversight of contracts under Jones' leadership, but Keaton says the medical center went through a transition from a paper to electronic file management system, which resulted in eliminating overlapping contracts in different departments. Keaton says the College Board knew about the steps in the transition, but in one case, a contract did not go to the board for approval because there was an emergency situation. Keaton says a review at the hospital did not find any wrongdoing, and the medical center never lost money. He became emotional when asked about Dan Jones during a press conference this week.
Well, I told you that's emotional. Hell of a guy. I'm not happy. About the best friend I got. And he's a hell of a physician and great integrity. And he cares about this place and he cares about Ole Miss. But he particularly cares about the citizens of Mississippi and particularly involved in health care. So how would you think I'd feel if you worked with a guy since '03 and we've been through all what we've been through and have made the changes here that make us what we are today? I can tell you 10 years ago, you wouldn't be in this room. You wouldn't care. you wouldn't have this many people sitting here caring about us. You care about us now because we're damn important.
Well, state lawmakers were shocked and disappointed by the College Board's decision about Jones' contract. Requests have been made in both the House and Senate to suspend the rules to introduce legislation on the matter. The Senate version would allow the 8 state universities to have individual boards of trustees that would have the power to select presidents. The College Board would still play a role. We spoke with Representative Steve Holland, who started a petition in the House to give Jones his job back, and Senator Gray Tollison, who says something should be done about how the College Board does business.
It was kind of the tipping point, so to speak. I mean, there have been other incidents at Southern Miss and in Mississippi State over the years, but certainly what happened with Chancellor Jones, which was completely unnecessary, and I think it was a tipping point that there needs to be change. It's an antiquated system, and we need to reform it. It's a difficult task. You have to get 2/3 votes of each house of each chamber, and then it has to be ratified by the voters to change the Constitution. But I think it's something that the time has come to change it. If there's anything positive to come out of this experience, would be let's change the board so this doesn't happen again. I think the credibility of the College Board has been drawn into question, obviously, by this decision, because I believe it to be very arbitrary. And now when you even have the former Vice Chancellor of UMC refuting every reason that they gave for dismissing or non-renewing Chancellor Jones, it makes it even worse. And I don't want to see this happen in the future, and I hope we can build momentum that this is something that, if we can't get it done this year, and obviously I acknowledge that it's the last week of the session, build some momentum to address this in the 2016 legislative session.
So you believe the College Board's decision was political in nature?
I don't know if it was necessarily political in nature. I've heard different things, but I don't think it was a good reason. And as I've said earlier, you have to look at the whole portfolio of the CEO of a company before you make a decision. And even the decisions or the basis of upon which they made a decision has kind of been drawn into question by Jimmy Keaton in his article. So I think, in Oxford, we think that Chancellor Jones has done an outstanding job, and I think it's reflected about the outpouring of support for him by the Alumni Association, by the students, by the faculty staff. I can't find anybody of the groups who are opposed to it, and they want his contract to be renewed. And honestly, there is a way that can be done. Everybody's got to put their pride aside and say, is this what's best for Ole Miss? And it's not best for Ole Miss. Chancellor Jones needs to remain in Ole Miss, and that should be the most important thing. What is best for Ole Miss at this time?
Dr. Jones is an impeccable administrator of Ole Miss. I still have not, in talking to College Board members and trying to ascertain the real reason for the termination, found anything substantive that would have mandated that call to be terminated. And I'm still very diminished about it. I don't know what we can do about it. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We got to be careful about restructuring the IHL board, but it needs attention, certainly. And there's a great movement. 87 House members signed a petition to ask the College Board to rethink, but I guess that doesn't matter to them, So
That was going to be my next question, because you started that petition, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Only because I wanted a sense, and by the way, it was exactly 50% Democrat and 50% Republican of the 87. So it couldn't have been better. It was very bipartisan, but we love Dr. Jones and we respect him and we salute him for his service, and we just think the College Board owes a hell of a lot of explanation to the people of Mississippi for what they've done.
Senate Rules Chairman Giles Ward and Senator Tollison released a statement Friday saying there won't be enough time to vote on any changes to the College Board structure before the session ends next week. Moving on now to other matters. There will be more money to spend for the state budget this year and next year. That's according to state economist Darren Webb. This week, the Joint Legislative Budget Committee added $102 million to the 2015 budget and added $30 million to the 2016 budget. Webb says a growing economy means more revenue for the state. We spoke with Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves and Representative Bobby Moak. Each has a different view on the new budget projections.
And the bottom line is, over and above what was spent in the November estimate, the chairman of appropriations in the House and the Senate have an additional $30 million to spend in fiscal year 2016. My analysis of that number is really pretty simple, and that is that isn't very much money, and I commend the chairman of appropriations in the House and the Senate for making education a priority. You know, there was a great debate on the floor of the Senate about whether or not we ought to send a bill to the governor that increases funding for K through 12 education by $110 million. The chairman made the point that sometimes a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. And in this instance, I am convinced that had the Senate not concurred with the House position, and I congratulate the House for having that position, then K through 12 education would be getting less money than they're going to get in the budget that has been sent to the governor, which I believe he's going to hopefully sign very, very soon. But the bottom line is that we've got some real challenges. I believe that the lion's share of the $30 million ought to go to community colleges and our institutions of higher learning, furthering our commitment to public education in our state. Because if we're going to grow our economy, if we're going to see long-term economic growth, we're also going to have to invest in having a better educated workforce. And certainly K through 12 community colleges and our institutions of higher learning all play a vital role in providing that.
It leaves us playing even. It leaves us at about even. When you only have a 1.7% growth, you're not going to see additional monies that go into education. You're not going to see any additional monies because there's not a majority of folks who want to take $1 billion a year of our tax dollars back from the federal government. So we are going to be stagnant, and in the year after that, we're going to give even more away to corporate America. So you're going to see us take a step back. You know, we're going to quickly follow some of these other states that we've been following, like Louisiana, who is in a dire financial strait right now.
We also spoke with Governor Bryant about his budget expectations as lawmakers go into the final week of the session.
Without any tax increases, that's important. I think you see the rainy day fund has been filled and will continue to have over $400 million in it. I think they'll spend $106 million on K through 12, more than last year. That's the largest amount's been spent in modern history. I think you'll see the second portion of that going for a $100 million teacher pay raise that we passed last year. Now, I hope we adequately fund the Department of Public Safety. They need support as well. We have a proposal to help fund about a $400 million transportation bond with some funding that is currently into the system. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to have a really good budget year.
Us to our At Issue Roundtable. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney and the executive director of a political action committee called the Mississippi Democratic Trust. Austin Barber is a Republican strategist. He's the founding partner of the Clearwater Group. And we welcome you both back to At Issue.
Thank you.
Let's start with IHL. I haven't seen an issue in Mississippi in many years that has brought so many people from all walks of life, male, female, Democrat, Republican, black, white, all, it seems, in favor of one thing, and that is keeping Dan Jones on the job. Brandon, were you surprised at the IHL's decision not to renew his contract?
Yeah, I think it was a particularly bad decision, and the IHL handled it really poorly. They came out at first without any explanation for their actions. Then they said it was management at UMMC. And then when that was rebuffed, they've gone back into executive session, where I think they would like to stay until all of this blows over.
Not exactly an option for them, but how about you, Austin? It's confounding, I guess, is one word for it.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. There's been a lot of rumblings, probably in the past year or so forth, about the relationship that Dr. Jones had with IHL. But I mean, to see them move on this sort of in the dawn, you know, at the end of the day, at the end of the week, was not a smart move by them. Certainly, it was not. If they felt compelled to this action, which obviously they did, they voted. I think it was 9-2. They should have sent someone out there to explain to Ole Miss alums like myself but to taxpayers in Mississippi of this was why we decided to do this. And they did not. They absolutely failed in that manner. Certainly a PR nightmare for them and a case study of how not to handle a situation like this.
Well, they certainly are privy to things the rest of us are not. They go into executive session to talk about personnel matters probably on a regular basis. Is it feasible that there could be some things that they know that we don't know?
Oh, sure there are. And I think that Alan Perry, who obviously you talked about him earlier in the show, who's the vice president, the vice chairman of the board, tried to get into some of those on Monday. But I think Brandon would probably agree, he's not the guy to put out there. It's not fair to him. Someone else who is probably a little more used to dealing with the media, dealing with situations like this, and I hear nothing but wonderful things about Alan Perry. He's a very smart guy, but he was the wrong person to put out there. It's not fair to him, and certainly there were other issues, and he tried to address them. But they did that in a very poor manner. They should have done this Friday at 4 or 5 o'clock afterwards. I was watching Sam Hall's Twitter feed from the Clarion Ledger, of course, who said, they won't return our phone call. They don't really have real reasons. You can't do that. You got to put your talking points out, put the facts out, put white paper out of this is why we made this decision. But they didn't, and they put themselves in this situation, and they've really put IHL, the future of IHL, in a precarious situation as the legislature looks at it probably in the 2016 session.
Yeah, what do you make of these efforts? There were some in the legislature, these resolutions we mentioned that sort of maybe in the heat of the moment, reactions to it, let's blow it up and redo this because of what's happened here.
I don't put much stock in those. Those were reactionary political moves by people in tough campaigns. Gray Tollison has a very tough race back home, and he needed to be right on this issue. Brad Mayo, the same thing. He's getting hammered on education every day because he's been wrong on education, so he wanted to have a bill. But this is a major institution in the state, by any estimation, the University of Mississippi. And this board had an obligation to the students there, the faculty, staff, the alums, to have a verifiable reason. And I think it's more than PR. I do agree with Austin. This was a PR nightmare. But I think there is an obligation when you serve on one of these boards and you make a decision that you have some pretty clear justifiable reasons. And I think the outcry comes from the fact that we just haven't seen presidents or chancellors fired for what seems like really circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, and I agree. Now, I have to defend Brad Mayo here for a second. As my friend across the table says that he's been wrong on education issues, they've been right on education issues as they continue to fund education at a higher level. I hate to delve into this, but we have to say this, 110 million more dollars this year last year. But I won't fall down that trap with you. But listen, I think Brandon's right. IHL should have handled this better. There's no question about that. Listen, boards run big entities like this. People like Dan Jones or others who have to report to these boards, if they have issues, and clearly Dan Jones had issues with this board, and I'm sure that he knew he had issues with this board, he should have, if you have to find one fault of his, he should have gotten with that board and fixed these, never letting this situation arise to where it is right now. But clearly, what is his future as we sit here at today on Friday? No one knows. They're clearly continuing to negotiate, and we'll be interested to see what happens with this.
I think it's worth saying, by any objective standard, Ole Miss has been thriving. I mean, record enrollment, record gifts to the school. Their budget is really sound, and even when they went back and looked underneath the hood at UMMC, it really wasn't in as much disarray as the board led us to believe. And so you're right. I mean, there may be things we don't know, but I think they've got a really big problem here with the evidence that's been made available to the public, that it just doesn't justify this reason, which leaves us with nothing more than, did they make it over personality reasons? Because that's really bad. Did they do it political?
Yeah,
that's really bad.
I don't think it's political. I really don't think it's political. And I know that some have tried to make this into some partisan issue, and I think very unfairly.
There's some conspiracy theorists out there who've spun some wild yarns about what might be at work here.
Yeah, they have. And I think one of them is our former governor, Ronnie Musgrove, who very interestingly decided to write an opinion piece in the Huffington Post sometime in the past few days, which I sort of thought that he was maybe he thought he was at Disney World in Fantasyland as he attacked former Governor Barber who of course he lost to twice, once as governor and then he lost to Ronnie Musgrove. So maybe he was trying to get some vengeance out there. But former Governor Musgrove was trying to make this a Republican versus Democrat, and it was not that issue. It's not a partisan issue whatsoever. But I think that was sort of silly, the tactic that Ronnie Musgrove decided to take this past week.
I think one of the things that Governor Musgrove did that was really tactful is to point out that there is a sense among people who watch this from the outside that there are political forces at work when it comes to who does what in state government, and that common folk sometimes don't have access to that. And the problem for the IHL board, and frankly for this administration, Governor Bryant, is that we've had too many instances, whether it's this, whether it's the Department of Public Safety, whether it's DMR, where you've had instances of agencies run amok and people who feel sort of powerless to get into that. And so I think in those circumstances, it is fair to say who's really in control and who's running government. And, there were some compelling arguments made. I don't know that we can connect all the dots now as to what happened.
Conspiracy theories. Because he was looking for the black helicopters and tinfoil hat on. But anyway, I won't go down that track either. Governor Bryant was brought into this last week, and I think very unfairly. He had 4 appointments of the 12 total members of the College Board that are currently on there. There were some that tried to blame this on him. I think it was very unfair. I think he found out at 4:30 on Friday, like most of us did, looking at the Clarion Ledger website or their local news affiliate. So I think that was very unfair, and he had nothing to do with this.
The problem for Governor Bryant is that he has no problem injecting himself into any issue that he feels like has a good payoff politically. He has no problem talking about the United States Supreme Court.
Well, if that was true, he would have injected himself to save Dan Jones, because obviously that was the right side of the aisle to be on this. I think he has said, look, this is an independent board that made this decision. I only have 4 appointments on there, and I don't have anything to do with this.
If I know Governor Bryant like I think I do, look for I Stand with Dan and Phil bumper stickers to roll out this November, because this guy blows with the wind, and he comes out and injects whenever it makes sense, and then you can't find him with an all-points bulletin whenever he feels like it's a touchy situation, which is not real leadership, which I think, look, I don't know that this IHL decision in and of itself is an indictment on him, but I do think that his leadership is lacking on the big, tough issues, and if it's a kind of a knee-jerk political issue that he knows is popular, he's always there. Well,
this always happens. This is going to roll back to the elections, which will happen in November, and voters will get a chance to determine if Brandon's right or wrong in November.
We'll have to leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you for a good discussion.
Thank you.
We'll see where this goes. Well, the state is getting help from the federal government for a 3-year pilot program to give job training to people on food stamps. A $20.5 million grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture will be used for job training and opportunities for those in the food stamp program, also known as SNAP.
The pilot will give USDA and our state partners an opportunity to explore more innovative, cost-effective ways to help SNAP recipients find and retain employment in order to build a stronger future for their families. The state's SNAP employment and training framework has many of the components already in place of a strong program, such as partnerships with technical colleges and local workforce programs. Therefore, this pilot will build on those strengths and test new strategies to help SNAP recipients gain and retain employment, leading to self-sufficiency and ultimately reducing their need for SNAP.
3,300 people receiving food stamps in Mississippi will be part of the program. It will be administered by community and junior colleges, the State Workforce Investment Board, and the Department of Employment Security. Now, MPB's Paul Boger joins us to talk about other issues at the Capitol, what's coming up, what has happened, and what we can expect. Paul, good to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
We had a good discussion there about IHL. We'll leave that alone for the moment. But let's talk about the weekend ahead. We're nearing the end of the session. Lawmakers will actually be, but they'll be at work through the weekend, right?
Yes, they will be. And you know, like you said, this is quickly coming to an end, and this is really when a lot of things start gearing up. You're going to see tomorrow. The leadership in both houses or both chambers will get together and do conference reports, essentially come together and say, this is what your bill says, this is what your bill says, let's find the difference, let's work it out, and have one bill that we can all agree on.
So they've got a little bit of time to get that done. And then what should we see next week?
You're going to see the climax of it all. You're going to see essentially the budget come out. And this is going to be what every state program gets for the rest of the year. So, you know, the big one, education, that's where you see a lot of debate. That one's already over. That one's already done. So you're going to see, you know, things like Medicaid. You know, there's going to be a large deficit in Medicaid apparently. There's going to be IHL funding, community colleges, a lot of stuff that a lot of people are really trying to look at.
Tax cuts, are they dead now?
Dead. You know, it is funny that there were two major points of the tax cuts: the franchise tax, which was for businesses, and the individual income tax, which was for individuals. So the franchise tax was pretty much dead last week. The income tax could have been brought up again this week, but it's gone now too. So no tax cuts for 2015.
A couple of things did happen in this week: the vouchers for special needs children and the no texting behind the wheel.
Yeah, those are now going heading up to the governor for his approval. So you're going to see that the voucher bill, which is a pilot program that will allow 500 parents of special needs students to get their children out of public school and into alternative education, is the word I've been using. They can use it for tutors, they can use it for private school, they can use it for homeschool and buy those materials, so whatever they like to do with that money.
The idea being they would have better opportunities for to administer or to address their special needs in those channels than they would in the public schools.
That's exactly
the idea
it,
behind it. And of course, everybody pretty much understands the texting, no texting and driving. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Pretty self-explanatory. You know, this law is really aimed at, you know, trying to save lives, and you hear every day about how difficult it can be to.
All right, Paul Boger of MPB, thank you so much. We're out of time. We thank you for joining us for At Issue. See you again next Friday.